This is Shadowdark Campaign Diary number 8. This was the revenge session. And these last few sessions have been coming in much quicker succession than the first half of this campaign, where I had described previously that the sessions were spread out over, it was 4 or 5 sessions over the course of 4 or 5 months. Mostly just because my wife and I were busy moving houses at the time, moving from one house to another. And my buddy, he was also busy with a lot of stuff going on in his personal life. So in the last couple months, we've cranked out at least 4 sessions. So I think these last 3 have been back to back to back. My wife's D&D campaign that my buddy and I are players in we're heading to a very large city. I think the largest city in her setting. So she needs a lot of time to prep that, obviously. So we've been able to play my Shadowdark campaign more frequently. So in this session, they had recruited the Swan at Darlin Keep, whose name is Harold, the Henry Cavill, lovable jock you can't help but love. He's just, he's too damn perfect. He's got too much going on. He's too handsome. He's too strong. He's too square-jawed. He's too earnest. But damn it, he's a good guy. He's a nice guy. You can't help but love him. So he's very are we ready to set off? Slay chaos and have great adventure, that kind of guy. Just comically one note, but with a little strain of I need to be paid for my family, of course, you understand. So he's got a little bit of something else going on. But this one, they set off from the keep in the morning with the plan to go back to the Wavestone Monolith, where they had their failure last session. They had lost their bard companion, Tamra. It's raining again. They choose to go down. Go down to the river from the keep. They take their raft across the river back into wild country. When they're pulling the raft, Harold says, "Hey, step aside, let me handle this." And he's one-manning, deadlifting, dragging this raft down to the riverbank, casually having a conversation while he's doing it. They cross over the river. They head back to the north. They come back to the crossroads where the southern road branches south, where the Harpies are, the Harpy-infested road. They have the Lost Citadel of the Scarlet Minotaur off to the east, and then to the north, the road continues through the mountains. Here was where I asked them if they wanted to go back off-road to potentially avoid the ogre and the other orcs that they had seen waiting on that ledge off to the side of this mountain road, kind of leading into the Bob Ross painting forest valley that contains the Wavestone Monolith pool waterfall area. It had been, I think, 3 days at this point since they had seen that ogre and those orcs there. So they decided to just take the road, keep their eyes out. And, sure enough, in the 3 days that had passed since they had come by this area previously, that little ambush party, scouting party, has withdrawn to where they don't know, but they're not there anymore. So they safely travel through the road down into this sort of forest valley and back to the pool and waterfall. It's late evening by the time they get there. The rain had slowed them somewhat, but it wasn't a full storm. It wasn't a 1 on the weather die, on the D6 die. So it didn't slow them to half speed like a full storm would have. But it slowed them down enough so that it was late evening by the time they got there. They decided to camp outside, not go in this time. The Ranger Calliope, poking around the banks of the pool, noticed what appeared to be tracks from maybe a couple of days ago. It's been raining, so any tracks that would have been there have been degraded quite a bit. She really can only spot them because she's a ranger. Like I described, that if any of the other players look at what she's looking at, they can't make anything out of it. It just looks like some slight disturbances in the sort of like muddy bank around this pool. And all she can determine is that they're roughly humanoid-sized footprints. Maybe orc, maybe human. My players are like, crab people? It's like, yeah, it could be crab people as well. My idea of what was going on here was that, I think these things, they come out to snag some shit every now and then. Like, obviously they're getting orcs in there somehow to be transformed into these crab people. And I don't think it's all just from orcs, choosing to go to this place. I think the orcs like avoid this place quite a bit. Like they will not go near it in my like headcanon, because they know that orcs disappear here. There's something, and they're around, so they hear these like sounds, these terrible inhuman screams that come echoing out of this place at night. So they wouldn't go near it of their own choice. So I think some crab people, some parties of crab people, must come out of here sometimes and grab things. And they had disturbed this place, obviously, by their previous entry into here. Lots of noise, a fight. And I think if they had an encounter when they were camping tonight near the lake, it would have been the crab people. I kind of think that that's probably the only encounter they would have near the pool, because I think other than very small wildlife, like the woodland critters, I think basically everything else would avoid this place because they know something's wrong here. Like there are some foul, unnatural creatures that haunt this area. So if they had a random encounter, I think it could only be with the crab people while they're around here. But they didn't. They went safely through the night. I think this whole session they didn't hit a random encounter. Just lucky on their rolls. So they rest safely through the night. Early the next morning, they get the raft that's still beached on the side of this pool. They take it under the waterfall into the cavern. Grist casts light on his long sword. They traverse this underground cavern to the pyramid. They go back up the front. I asked them, "Are you guys just going straight back to the front?" And they said, "Yeah," because there is at least one other way into this place. But they didn't. I don't think they did the first time either. I don't think they looked around. That's one of the things I don't. It's a very. I don't know if I would call it OSR, but definitely in the OSR, it's. I think players who are familiar with it would always expect that there are multiple entrances to any kind of dungeon, because there usually are. I don't know that my players have ever really started thinking that way. Usually, when we're playing 5e, it's we play it kind of how you would expect modern 5e to be played, where it's less about the environment, it's less about like solving the dungeon, things like that, and it's more about the story, the narrative. So usually it's just like, okay, here you go, you get to this place, here's the entrance to it, you go in. I think when we get to the Lost Citadel, the Scarlet Minotaur, I'm going to try to, break them of the habit of not really thinking about if there are other entrances. But yeah, I've never really communicated to them like above board that there are usually more than one entrance. So that's something I think I'll just have to do in a pretty straightforward way. But they go to the front stairs. They go back up. I was wondering if maybe they would try to use the trap through the doorway at the top of the stairs. That when you're going back down into the stairs leading down into the pyramid, there's a trap on the doorway where if it's activated, if it's active, ready to go, it will turn the steps leading down into the pyramid into like a slide, essentially. Like the steps all go from like this to like this. So it slides down and then a pit opens up at the bottom. But their characters didn't know what this trap did, because they deactivated it when they first found it. So I had told them, I think, above board when they were fleeing last session. I had mentioned, because I think in my head for a second I was just like, oh, well, they're done with this place. They're not going to be coming back. I don't know why I thought that, but that was what was in my head at the time. So I think I had just told them, like, this is what the trap was. If you hadn't deactivated it, this is what would have happened. But they may have forgot that. Well, actually, no. I know they didn't forget that because one of my players brought it up. But their characters didn't know that, so maybe they didn't want to, sort of metagame in that way. But one way or another, they didn't try to use the trap to their advantage. They continued down into the first room of the dungeon, which is like the slug room, and then they basically know the whole layout of the dungeon at this point. So they know that if they go to the west from this first room, that's like basically the shortcut to where all of the crab people are, and then the brain eater, the mind flayer. So I'd asked them if they wanted to, which way they wanted to proceed, if they wanted to go that way, or if they wanted to do what they had previously done, which is go all the way around the dungeon in the other direction and approach into the same room where they previously had their fight, the large room with the 3 pools that are changing creatures into crab people, and then the secret door that connects over to the room with all the crab people in it. and they said they wanted to go back around to the room where they had the fight previously. So, with them moving through this dungeon, they circle all the way back around. And I put the map. I just showed them the map of the dungeon at this point, with with my finger blocking out the two rooms they hadn't seen yet, which is just the area behind the velvet curtain in the Brain Eater's room, and the secret treasure vault that is connected via a tunnel to the dirty pool with the giant leeches in one of the other rooms, where they had thrown some things in the water, and I had described a black fleshy thing moving along the surface and then going back underwater. Now, normally, as I've said before, I would always have a dungeon and its denizens react to what the players had done previously. So, the fact that they had been here, stirred things up, left, and then came back. Normally, I would have some kind of ambush or like trap. It would be different in some way, at least. Like, at minimum, like the distribution of the creatures would be different than when they had previously come here. This time I did not do that. So this is kind of my 1-2 checklist thing. One, from a gameplay standpoint, even with their knowledge of what's here and what they can expect, and with their companion Harold, who he's pretty badass. For him, I use the Knight stat block from the core book. It's a level 3 creature, plate mail, shield, bastard sword, AC 17 if they're using their shield, which he did. And I think he has like 15 hit points, something like that. And he attacks twice. That's the big thing. So even with their knowledge and their new companion, this fight is still like extremely difficult. Like if the Brain Eater gets involved at the same time as there are a lot of crab people left, then that's brutal, man. And then if it's in some kind of like ambush position or in any way disadvantageous to the players, I think there's basically no chance of them winning. So, from the gameplay standpoint of, we don't just want like catastrophic failure, and from the plausibility standpoint of, first of all, these things are very dumb. They're not going to do anything of their own initiative, of their own accord. The Brain Eater would have to be directing them, micromanaging them essentially. So they're too stupid to do anything on their own. And I think the Brain Eater is, I imagine him as kind of aloof, combination of aloof and overconfident. Like this party hadn't shown the Brain Eater any reason to really be concerned before. They just kind of came in, got their asses kicked, lost one of their members, and then ran. So in the Brain Eater's head, he's like, there's nothing special here. If they come back, we'll just kill them. So for those two reasons, my 1-2 gameplay / plausibility checklist, I didn't have, anything like any deadly surprise waiting for the characters or anything. So they were able to just like set up and execute their own plan, which their plan was basically to run back the first fight, but making sure they get the advantageous position of blocking the doorway this time, which really was that was the big difference, was their lack of any sort of good positioning before. So what they did is they came to the room with the 3 pools that has the secret door on the west side connecting to the room with all the crab people. So they enter from the east side, and I described that in the otherwise silent dungeon, they can hear sounds of some occasional splashing water coming from this other room through the secret door, and some occasional cracking sounds. And this is these things eating their handfuls of sludge, shell, bits of shell, bits of old fossil, things like that. So they're in there munching, slushing around in there, filthy water a little bit. So the plan is for Harold and for Grist, as the frontliners, to get up and block the door before these things can get their bearings. So that's how they start. They reach the eastern side of the room, prepare themselves, and then book it at a sprint over to the west side of the room to get to that door to block it before the crab people can react. So that's how they start. Harold and Grits sprinting across the room. Harold is, of course, quite loud because he's in plate mail. So I rolled a die to see how quickly the crab people would react to this. And it was pretty favorable to the players, so I said that they're able to get across the room, up to and blocking the door by the time these things are really reacting. The initiative roll, so there was no surprise. I think basically they kind of used their surprise round to get into position. The initiative rolls went quite well for the party, with the notable exception of Grits, who rolled a natural 1. Everybody else went first before any of the enemies. So that helped. So, with the fight starting, Gabo got used quite a bit of the that chunk of amber with the magical rubies that summon dragonflies. Leaned on that quite heavily in this fight. So Gabo summons a dragonfly in the basically in the other room with the crab people in front of Harold and Grist. So Harold and Grist are blocking the door. Dragonfly is in the next room. And once they put the dragonfly over there, I went ahead and I placed all the enemies on the board. There were 8 of them left at this point. So 8 of them plus the Brain Eater. It takes 3 rounds for the Brain Eater to get there. And they did very well. They were having a fairly easy time of it up to the point that the Brain Eater got there. The Dragonfly, as previously mentioned, it's pretty badass. 2 attacks, decent HP, decent AC. So, first 2 or 3 rounds, it's the fight around the doorway. Harold sort of steps into the other room, just 1 or 2 spaces, to sort of get at the enemies because they're not crowding into the doorway yet because the dragonfly is over there as well. So with the dragonfly and Harold, and then Grits is he cast Shield of Faith on himself. He might have failed, actually. He was struggling a little bit with his rolls this fight. But I think he might have failed. I think he failed with Shield of Faith, and then the Herald and the Dragonfly took down, I think, 2 of them, and then the Dragonfly went down because it was just swarmed by all the remaining crab people in this room. Once the Dragonfly goes down, all the crab people are pressing up and into this doorway, which Harold has retreated into after the Dragonfly goes down. So they're fully in their, tactical position. I think Grits had moved into Harold's place when Harold stepped into the room. The crab people's room. Harold had taken 1 or 2 steps in there to get some swings off. So Grits had moved into his position, and then Harold moved back onto the square next to Grits. So it's like, here's the doorway, here's Grits blocking it, here's Harold right here. And I kind of ruled that they're both blocking the doorway, essentially. It's like they both have shields. They made a plan. Harold's an experienced soldier, and they're acting and thinking tactically. So they're kind of operating as a unit, like shield walling this door, kind of. And I had to do some creative ruling here on exactly how this would work. Because I didn't want it to be, like, if you just went by the book, then, like, by the book in a tactical, like, gridded sense, which I know is not really what Shadowdark is about, then it would be kind of maybe too easy. Like, only 1 or 2 can get attacks on you, and they can only attack the person that's directly in front of them in the doorway. So I kind of ruled it as a like a body press situation. Like, think of like like a World War Z with the press of zombies just sort of like washing over things, or in like 300, kind of like ancient Greek warfare. I mean, obviously 300 is basically fantasy, but there is precedent, from what I understand, in a lot of ancient warfare where 2 bodies of men would come together, and then it's basically a pushing contest, and who could push more while poking at each other with pointy things until one side breaks. So in my head, that's kind of what's going on here. I was having them make opposing strength checks. And then because you have the door here, Grit straight across from it, and then Harold to the side, this third square, which is adjacent to the doorway, is empty. So they're making opposing strength checks against each other. Grit's Harold against the crab people. And then if the crab people win their strength checks, I rule that like one of them can move through this like path of least resistance, this diagonal square that is empty, and they can sort of flood past Harold and Grits into the room. So with 1 or 2 rounds of this sort of like battle at the doorway going on, like 2 or 3 of them managed to shove their way through into the room. And then Gabo summoned another dragonfly to sort of like not block. He couldn't block at this point because the crab people were already in the room occupying the spaces, but put it there to sort of absorb these crab people that are pushing their way into the room. And in this press at the door situation, with a few crab people having shoved their way into the room. So we've got like a tight sort of like Grits, Harold, Dragonfly, and then crab people sliding in along, sort of filling up the space near the doorway. This is where the Brain Eater comes in. The Brain Eater shows up, it's whispering things into their head. I think it says something like, "Oh, she was delicious," like referring to Tamra, their bard, just to kind of make them feel, maybe make them angry. And then it shows up. It can see Harold and Grits in the doorway. And it says something to them like, "Oh, put your weapons down." And then it hits them with the Mind Blast. Now, this Mind Blast is disgusting. This ability, is the reason I was worried about this dungeon. Obviously, the Mind Flayer itself, the rest of its stat block, it's tough. It's a tough creature. It can attack 4 times. It also has a charm ability that it didn't end up using just because it didn't seem like the best thing for it to do at the time. But it can attack 4 times if it latches with all 4 of its tentacles, which when a tentacle hits, it latches. Then it just eats somebody's brain. It eats their brain if all 4 of its tentacles are latched to somebody. But this Mind Blast literally was the reason that I was worried about this entire dungeon, because it is a DC 15 intelligence check. No one in the party has good intelligence. Somebody might have a +1, but that's it. Nobody has higher than a +1 intelligence, and 15 is hard to make. And if they fail, they take 3d6 damage, which is a lot in Shadowdark, and they're paralyzed for 1d4 rounds. So this thing is just a complete fight winner. This thing will just flip a fight, end a fight immediately. So I was like, okay, here we go. It can see Grits and Harold, so it's using it on these first 2 that it can see. And, it can see what's going on. It can see that these are the 2 warriors blocking the doorway, making it difficult for the crab people. So it hits them with the Mind Blast. They both fail their check. Grits chooses not to use a luck token to reroll, and I didn't, try to press him or hint him into using it. He wants to let it stand. It stands. So they both fail. They take 12 damage each, which leaves Grits with 2 HP. Leaves Harold with 3, I think. Something worth noting is that Grits, the night before at the campsite, had cooked. He'd used the cooking activity, which gives everybody 2 temporary HP for the next day. Pardon me. So that was super useful and relevant in this fight. Oh, and then Grits also remembered to actually use his armor this time. So in the second round of the combat, when he was blocking the door after Harold had stepped out and then made his tactical retreat back in, Grits had taken 2 hits, and he remembered to use it to negate one of them. So, no, he had taken 1 hit, and he negated it. So he was at full health when he got hit by this Mind Blast, which is very good, because I think if, he would have died. He would have gone down if he had been at anything other than full health, essentially. Now, they got lucky because their 1d4 paralyzed rounds came up as a 1. So, dude, if it had been anything besides a 1, I don't know if they would have won this fight. There's a lot of things that I don't know if they would have won this fight if it hadn't. I don't know if they would have won the fight if it hadn't been for the dragonflies, the multiple dragonflies. And or for the rolling a 1 on the 1d4 rounds of paralyzation. So they fail their check. They're paralyzed for a round, take a bunch of damage. Right after the Brain Eater, all of the crab people go. So they are swinging at Harold with advantage. And I use the... in my game, in Shadowdark, if you're paralyzed, then it's the same rule as D&D 5e, where any melee hit on you is an automatic critical. So they land a critical on Harold. He goes down. They swarm past Harold onto, a lot of them onto this dragonfly that Gabo had resummoned. So dragonfly takes a hit or two, I believe, and it's dishing out punishment as it receives it. So Grits, skips his round, recovers at the end of it. Harold makes his death check, whatever it's called. He rolled a 4 on his 1d4 of rounds, and he had +1 con. So he had 5 rounds until he went down, but at least some of them were continuing to attack him. So, Gabo, the Dragonfly, Calliope, continuing to try to take these things down as quickly as they can as they're coming in. They've probably gone through half of the majority, they're probably at about half, and then I think on this combat round they got through, they whittled them down to maybe like a couple left besides the Brain Eater. Maybe 2 or... I think there were like 3, actually, yeah. And then something else that Grits had done before Harold went down was he had cast Cleansing Weapon on Harold. So Harold's sword was doing an extra 1d4 damage of magical damage. So Grits, on his turn, tried to cast Cure Wounds on Harold to get him back up. He failed it. He used a luck token to reroll it, and he failed it again. And that was his last luck token. So that was pretty grim. Like, things were not looking good at that point. And then when it got to... See, now I'm forgetting something, because I remember Harold ended up rolling on the Enduring Wounds table, which means he had gone down twice. Oh, I remember what happened. Okay, so this is what happened. Grits failed both of his Cure Wounds checks on the priest, but then he remembered, this is a throwback, he had 1 magical acorn left from what the Treants had given him way back in like the second session of this campaign. It was just a random encounter they'd had a night with some neutral Treants that were passing by. And because my buddy was role-playing a lot and really trying to see what he could get out of them, I had them give him 3 acorns. I thought he'd used them all, but he had 1 left. I think he'd had it on the horse or donkey the whole time. And before they left the keep this time, he went back to the horse and donkey, and he was like, oh shit, there's still an acorn in here. So, being somewhat generous on my part, I ruled that as like a free action, bonus action type thing, he could shove or toss the acorn into Harold's mouth. So, after the failed Cure Wounds, he gives the acorn to Harold. Harold comes back up. I describe him as like, screaming with rage. The knight has an ability in their stat block where they can, 3 times a day, they can get advantage on, I think the wording is like a task that relates to their nightly duties, something like that. And I was like, okay, well, anything we're doing here relates to his knightly duties. I think he's like kind of pledged himself temporarily to this party to help them. So any kind of fighting or whatever is part of these duties. So he comes back up. It's this like kind of dramatic moment. He makes 2 attacks with advantage on the 2 nearest crab people. I think both of whom were already injured. So he fucking takes one down with 1 shot, takes another down with the next shot. And then he like charges up on the Brain Eater. And then it was the next round that he went down again. And this is where he rolled on the Enduring Wounds table. And here we go again. When he rolled on this Enduring Wounds table, he rolled a natural 20. So here we are, just like last session, with another situation of a character going down in a crucial moment that might have a huge impact on how things play out. And then serendipitously, a natural 20 is rolled. Now, on the Enduring Wounds table, the natural 20 result is literally called Miracle. And the result of the table, so I guess I wasn't really using the table at the exact moment of time where it's supposed to be meant, because where it's supposed to be used, because if you read the description at the top of the table, it says, if a character survives going to 0 HP, then they should roll on this table and see what they get. So I guess the idea is like, you survived your ordeal, but you're going to have a lingering injury from it. This table's kind of weird, if my memory serves, where, like, as written, it wouldn't necessarily make the most sense. It's hard for me to remember exactly what it was about this, how this various parts of this table interacted with one another that made me think that. But in such a way that it was like somewhat unclear when exactly this table is supposed to be used. So I was just kind of using it as like, oh, you just got hit, you're going down for a second time. You're gonna have a lasting effect from this. So the text for Miracle said you get advantage on your next attack or check. So obviously that's meant to be rolled like when you're coming back up. Like, okay, you survived going down. Here's what's happening as you come back up. But, I'd rolled it when he was going down. So, and both my players here, including my buddy, who as mentioned prior, is more like by the book, kind of hardcore, doesn't like being bailed out, doesn't like the hand of the GM in there, making things happen, pulling punches, things like that. So, but both of them were like, oh, that's a natural 20. That's a natural 20. It's literally called Miracle. Harold comes back up. Harold comes back up. I think they were chanting like, Harold, Harold. And I was like, all right, fine. Harold comes back up with 1 HP. And I think that was like from a blow from one of the crab people. The Brain Eater had ended up going past the downed Harold, getting engaged with the Dragonfly. It takes down the Dragonfly like pretty quickly, like 2 rounds, I think, not even using all of its attacks on the second round. Believe it's, well, Harold, after the Dragonfly goes down, Gobbo summons a third Dragonfly. Harold lands 2 big attacks on the Brain Eater on his next turn. This thing had like 36 hit points and I think 14 AC, so it was tough. But Harold lands 2 attacks on it with his still like magically empowered weapon. Shouting at it like, die, beast. Like, he's fucking jacked. He's feeling his knightly valor. And then I think it's the dragonfly ends up, yeah, taking the final blow on it. And I asked Gabbo's character or player, my wife, to describe how the dragonfly takes out the brain eater. She describes it as like a throwback to to Merwena's death up there, who had her head ripped off by the avatar of the dragonfly god. So this thing, two of the brain eater's tentacles were like latched to the dragonfly at this point. So she describes it as like tentacles first, like sucking this thing like into its mouth. And you see like the brain eater's eyes begin to go wide as he's pulled, tentacles and all, into the mouth of this giant dragonfly. And then proceeds to rip its head off. And I think there was one crab person left after the brain eater went down. Obviously, we're in the portion of the fight where, this is done. It's just a question of the last couple rolls. So they finish off the final crab person. They check out the body of the brain eater. It has a magical item on it, which is unique to this adventure. I think it's called like the Antediluvian Shell. It's a magic, like spiraling, one of those like thin and long seashells that's like glowing, sort of like humming with magic. I had described that Grits felt like a sort of like resonance with this thing. It somehow felt familiar to him. And I described Gabbo as not having the same feeling. And that was because this thing, amongst a couple other things, lets you commune with the statue that had, the magical statue that had given Grits the wish spell. And commune as in like literally the spell commune, which is extremely powerful. I think it just lets you straight up ask questions and get answers. And, an ancient magical entity like, whatever this statue is representing obviously would have a lot of information. Now, this was kind of weird because obviously I wanted Grits to have this item. It just made sense because Grits had been the one who had basically communed with the statue before. So when Gabbo picked it up, I described like Gabbo does not feel the same resonance with this thing that Grits does. And then Gabbo was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to keep it. And I described that when Gabbo went from the kind of like holding it up, like dangling it, to actually like grasping it, like possessing it, that Gabbo felt like a connection begin with this statue that Grits had got the wish from. And I did this because, one, it makes sense that that's what this thing would do. It lets you commune with this statue, so logical that you would feel some kind of connection with the statue upon taking possession of this item. And then two, this was another attempt for me to indicate that, hey, this thing is connected to that statue that Grits had previously gotten a wish from. So, maybe give it to Grits. Gabbo, he took it and then he kept it. I hope he gives it to Grits. Like, I hope my wife gives it to my buddy. Honestly, I was kind of confused by her, like, taking and keeping this thing. It's like, are you not picking up that this is, like, connected to that statue that Grits is also connected to? So I don't know. I don't know if she's just role-playing, just trying to be kind of like the loot goblin, and then she's going to give it back to him eventually. Or if she's just not picking up on the dynamic, or if she's just kind of like being like, no, whatever, I don't care, I want to keep it. Hopefully it's not that last one. But, it'll be worked out. presumably in the next session. So after they won their fight, this like horde, this pile of bodies like stacked up by the doorway in the key area where most of the battle had taken place. They go up, they proceed to the Mind Flayer's room. They go back behind his velvet curtain. They find the body of Tamra in this room. Her face, like just like all the other perforated skulls in this area, from the Brain Eater's tentacles going into them. Her body and her head has been pierced with many holes. It's in a state of decay, desiccation. I say that they can see part of her like many-colored barred cloak spilling out of her pack. An unfortunate scene, they sort of respectfully like wrap up the body. Harold, sort of gives a little bit of like prayer to Madeira to it. They continue behind the velvet curtain into the Brain Eater's room. And here is where I moved the treasure in this dungeon. The treasure had previously been hidden in that pool with the giant leeches in it. You have to go down into the pool and then swim through a little tunnel to get to the treasure room, which is also underwater. And one of the 3 treasure chests is a black pudding when you open it. And a black pudding is like crazy in this game. It can only be hurt by fire. And they're underwater. So, I mean, to me, that's just like death. That's a death trap. I don't know how the hell they're supposed to deal with that other than just like running if they can. And then also, I was just worried that they wouldn't find it. That they wouldn't think to look there. And I really wanted to reward them. Like, first of all, it had been a while since they had really gotten like good rewards. And they had failed in this place before. It had been kind of a feel bad. They lost a companion here. They came back. They had a really tough fight. They used a lot of resources to win the fight. So I really wanted them to, have a good feeling of reward for completing this adventure. So I moved the chests from the underwater room to the Brain Eater's room. And I replaced the black pudding with just more treasure. So they ended up finding a total of like 280 gold pieces or gems that were worth gold pieces. So 280 gold value. They found a scroll and a wand, both of which Gritz the priest can use. And then they found in the third chest 3 potions. It was kind of difficult with the potions because I rule it as like they don't know what these potions are upon finding them. They could like taste them a little. I don't remember where I got this. There's something, it's either D&D or some other thing says like, oh, if you taste a potion a little bit, you can get some ideas of its effects. So it was like, oh, do you want me to just like write? The player was asking like, do you really want me to just like have to write down a description of each of these potions, a visual description without knowing what they are? And I was like, One of them was just a healing potion. So for that one, I was like, okay, this is a healing potion. You can just write that down. They don't know what level of healing potion it is, but they know it's a healing potion. But the other 2 are pretty powerful. One of them is I think it's called like a potion of heroic deeds or something like that. It just straight up levels you up. It just gives you a level. And then the other one is a potion of polymorph. So those 2, I did not tell them what it was. I just described it. The potion of angelic, whatever it's called, the legendary deeds, I think, that levels you up. It's just like this glowing elixir that like hums with like an angelic note as you hold it up and look at it. And the other one, the potion of polymorph, is like a newt, a pickled newt suspended in clear liquid inside this little flask. So I liked both of those descriptions, and I think, unlike the description of the potion of healing, they give an indication of what kind of thing we're dealing with here. You know, you look at a newt, pickled newt floating in liquid, and you get the sense like, that's probably kind of weird. I'm not really sure what that is. Which polymorph is kind of weird, you know. And then the other one's just this like golden liquid that like hums, kind of sings as you hold it up. It's like, yeah, obviously that sounds good. Sounds powerful and a positive effect. So I was okay with them just having the descriptions for those two because they're more powerful and the descriptions pretty much match what their effect is. So after they collected all their loot, they'd given Harold some of it because obviously he's promised to do. And I tried to have Harold impressed that like, wow, like we just found so much stuff. Like I think he looked at the wand and was like, oh man, just that wand by itself, like the wizard in town would pay a huge sum for that. Really, it would be like 200 to 300 gold pieces, but that is a huge sum. You know, that is a huge sum of money in this world to like an average person. Harold's not quite average. He's like a minor noble. You know, all of the knights are at least tangentially related to the ruling house, so they're all kind of minor nobility. But even he is like, wow. If it had been just some regular dude, some regular man-at-arms with them, they would be like, oh my god, like this is great. Like I've hit it big. Like I've hit the jackpot. I can retire off this. Like that's the kind of vibe I wanted to give them. Like to remind them like, hey, you know, I know you're adventurers in an adventure game and finding loot and gold is not like that big of a deal to you. But this had been like by far probably the biggest haul of the campaign from a single place. And it, you know, it was just like, oh, it was a lot. So I wanted them to like really feel impressed by what they had captured. So they bring all their loot out of there. They don't go check anywhere else in the dungeon. Now, if I hadn't put the loot in there, maybe they would have. You know, maybe I might be underestimating them. Like, although it wasn't just me worried about them thinking to look for the loot anywhere else. It was also just me worried about them. Like, first of all, they would have to deal with the leeches. And then like the black pudding, I think I would have just got rid of that black pudding no matter what happened. Cause like, come on, man, we don't need another level 6 challenge in this place, especially a thing underwater that's impervious to everything but fire damage. Like, what are we doing? So, you know, if I hadn't put the treasure in the Brain Eater's room, maybe, probably they would have kept looking. Cause from like a meta sense, you're like, whoa, like we just overcame like a huge challenge. Like, surely there's got to be more loot in this place. And I, as the GM, could have given them a little like, yeah, oh yeah, you know, like kind of indicate to them without indicating to them that, yeah, there's more loot here. Could have done that. Probably would have been okay. But like I said, I just wanted to reward them. So they leave with all their treasure. Try to give them like a, you know, everything about this place feels a little bit less menacing, a little bit lighter, you know, now that you've sort of broken the terrible power that was infesting this place. So they leave, they go back out. This all happened in like the morning, so it's only like mid to late morning when they come back out. They give Tamra her proper burial. Gritz says, you know, the full priestly words, does his, you know, his little prayers and symbols and stuff, which I kind of let him like make up on the spot. Like he's allowed to flesh out what the kind of details of his religion are. It's kind of how I've been doing the Shadowdark campaign. And then they, after giving her proper burial, which takes them all day, they camp in the forest by the lake again and begin their journey back to Darlin Keep the next day.